Here we are. We're live. Hey, everybody. I'm Christina Previte, and you are watching or listening to Lawyer Radio, the official podcast of Wolf Esquires. And I pulled together a roundtable at the last minute with these three awesome ladies because I was pondering the question of when do you know it's time for a divorce? And I posted that on Facebook, and you three were some of the first three that volunteered. So I'm assuming you have some opinions about this. But first, we're going to tell everybody who you are. We have Hillary Walsh, founder of New Frontier Immigration Law with locations throughout Arizona. Jigisha Thakor, financial advisor and insurance broker in New Jersey, and also the founder of Shanti Now. And Janette Soltys is a family law attorney in Atlanta and founder of Atlanta Holistic Family Law. I love that name. So welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so who wants to go first and answer this burning question of how do you know when it's time for a divorce? What's the biggest sign? Anybody?
Well, for me, I'll answer this from an immigration lawyer space, right? So a lot of my clients will be married in what we call a mixed status marriage. And so one person will have status and the other person will be either in the process or completely undocumented. And for me, it's always when someone starts holding the petition process over the undocumented person's head that it's time to, I think that that just, number one, shows a huge level of insecurity on behalf of the U.S. citizen or the lawful permanent resident, whoever is the person who has status. And they're saying like, oh, if I petition for you, you're going to leave me. That is number one. Like, this person is not in it for the long haul, and they're using this as a way to manipulate and control you. And you should talk to a divorce lawyer and also an immigration lawyer, because even if that happens, you can still usually do what's called a self-petition process where you can stay married to this person even. But I really think that is the beginning of the end of so many relationships in mixed status families.
Well, my understanding is that, and I don't want to do like a deep dive into immigration law, but my understanding is that they do have to be married for a certain period of time, and they have to show that that's actually a real marriage, that it wasn't just something they manufactured for citizenship, right, or a green card.
You don't have to be married for a certain amount of time, but you do have to show you've been married for love, not for papers. But any amount of time, you can go get married and then come drive over to my office. In fact, I know some immigration lawyers who are like ordained ministers or whatever it's called, where they can legally marry people, and they marry them in their office, and then they have them sign their documents, and then off they go. So as long as you can show that you got married for love and not for papers, you're good to go. There's no timing aspect to it.
Okay, that's good to know, because I did think that there was some sort of timing with that. I should have you come on another time so we can do a deep dive into the immigration stuff. But I agree, anytime you're using anything, whether it's the citizenship issue or the green card issue,
the kids, the finances, like anytime you start getting into those threats, I think that it's time to talk to someone, because maybe it's a marriage counselor, maybe it's your own personal therapist, but it's time to talk to someone who can give you objective third-party advice, because that is not okay behavior, and we should never tolerate that for someone who's in such an intimate relationship with us.
Yeah, there shouldn't be conditions, right?
Yeah.
What about you guys? What about you, Jeanette and Gigi? What jumps out at you?
So I've been divorced, and so I've kind of lived through how hard it is to make that decision, especially when you have a kid. I've actually been divorced twice, but the first one was real easy because I was in my 20s. We didn't have kids. We didn't have money. It was like, it's so much easier, right? When you don't have so much that you've built with that person. So I've been there where it's such a hard decision. But my opinion is, when you know that this is not a relationship you can live with for the rest of your life. If you're like, okay, am I okay with the way things are now forever? If the answer to that's no, then you try to fix it. And if you get to the point where you've done everything you can to fix it and it's not getting better, that's when I think you leave. Because at that point, it's like, okay, I know things are going to stay the same, and I know I'm not okay spending my life with the way things are. So I've got to move forward.
Well, I agree with that. I I guess maybe I want to fine tune it a little bit though, because what I see, and I'm sure you do too, is I'll get somebody that comes in for a consultation and they're thinking about it, but they've been thinking about it for a long time, sometimes years.
Yeah.
And it's like at some point you have to make a decision. You know, we might be with somebody and say, well, I think I'm probably not going to be with this person forever, but when is the time? Like, when is it?
It's like having a baby or starting a firm or anything else. Like, there's never the perfect timing for this. That you just have to do it. And
But
I would say like the biggest feedback I get, especially from women like in their 40s and 50s, is their biggest regret is waiting so long.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. I hear that from men and women. What
Yeah.
about you, Gigi? You look like you have something to say.
Yeah. So, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, because I'm one of the few financial advisors that are women, I do have a lot of clients that are either divorced or going through a divorce or whatever the case may be, right? So, the one pattern that I have noticed is, I mean, I think everyone kind of knows, like when their marriage is in trouble, they know it. The partner sometimes knows it, sometimes doesn't. And oftentimes women will, reach out and say, listen, I'm not happy. I think we should go to counseling. And so the response to that from the partner's, viewpoint should be, okay, let's go and try to fix this. Oftentimes that's not the case. Yeah. Many of the women that are our clients, many of them, and I mean, like, not just a few of them, a lot of them will reach out and say, okay, let's try to fix this. Oftentimes the response from the partner is, I don't think there's anything wrong. I think the response sometimes is, well, there's nothing wrong with me, so there must be something wrong with you. That's never the right answer, by the way. If there's, someone listening to this, that's never the right answer. If someone is telling you that they're unhappy, you have to listen and think about it and validate their feelings and say, okay, what are you unhappy about? How can we fix this, right? And if you have a partner that's just saying, hey, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm great, there's clearly an issue with you, and that often is the case here. And then there's other cases, I volunteer for the battered women's shelter, and obviously that's a whole nother, similar to what Hillary was saying, we've encountered a lot of women who, whether they're financially dependent on their partner, so they feel like they're stuck, right? In whatever bad situation, whether it's due to finances, whether it's, due to mental, physical, whatever the abuse situation happens to be. But yeah, I think we all kind of know it deep down inside that we're not happy. And once we tell someone that we're not happy with whatever it is, I'd like to go to counseling, or I'd like to address this, however, and the response from that partner is, no, there's nothing wrong. I think you really need to start thinking, right? Okay, well, yeah, that's great that you don't think there's anything wrong. I think there's something wrong, right?
Yeah. Well, if one person thinks there's something wrong, then there's something wrong.
Yeah, right.
There's something that has to be discussed or resolved.
This is coming from someone logical, Christine.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I'm a judge that I clerked for a long time ago, 20 years ago, it said something that was brilliant and wise and still applies. And he said the people that we see in court, they're probably getting divorced because they don't know how to communicate effectively with each other. So you can't expect them to communicate any better when they're getting a divorce. So, the level of conflict there sometimes comes from that very thing that caused the divorce in the first place, is that they're really just not communicating with each other. So when one person is saying there's a problem, there is a problem, that you need to talk about that.
And it's usually the woman who's saying there's a problem. Have you guys seen, I don't know if it's one study or multiple studies, but it shows that single women are happier than married women, but married men are happier than single men. So that's a whole nother discussion about how marriage has served men for many, many years, but things are changing and it's not really serving women as well.
Yeah.
I've been married for it'll be 20 years in November. I got married when I was 20 and I got engaged when I was 19. And I look back and I'm like, who was there on the sidelines saying this was a good idea? But nevertheless, it apparently was a good idea because here we are, we have 4 kids. But I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we went through I think that every, spell, you go through a really hard time and you have to make some big decisions. And they're usually at stages of big personal growth for one person, but maybe not necessarily the other. And you have to decide. And really it does come down to a decision if you're going to stick it out. I love hearing Michelle Obama talk about how she didn't like Barack for like 10 years, but she knew that he was still a good man and he was still the right man for her. And that type of candor about the difficulties of staying in a long-term relationship, I think is really important and really helpful, especially to hear from other maybe high-performing women who it would be just fine for us to pack up and go, and financially we wouldn't necessarily notice a big difference. But we went to marriage counseling, and I love my marriage counselor. Her name is Abby Metcalf, and I do not have a coupon or any influencer points for this, but I've referred so many people to her, and she has a great podcast too. I can't remember what it's called, but I think it's like Relationships Made Easy or something. And it really does, Christina, going back to what you were talking about, where it's like about communication, especially if you're married to a lawyer. She taught me over and over, would you rather be right or would you rather be effective? And man, and that has even helped me in my business, where working with employees and working with clients who maybe I have a disgruntled client, but it is a form of communication where you're like, how do I end up wanting to lead this conversation, right or effective? And when you go into it with that energy and that kind of intention, I don't know how else we can describe it. I think that helped me a lot in my marriage, where my spouse will feel very defensive because I'm so pointed and frankly attacking, because I'm trained like a lawyer. I'm trained to cross-examine witnesses. I'm trained to ask the questions that lead to what I want to get to. And I can't help but not to turn to that, because it's been something that's so helpful for me in my life, but it's really unhelpful for me in my relationships. And so I agree. Communication, if you can work on that. And she even gave me her initial book, which was like how to save your marriage, even if your partner won't do a thing. And it's just a lot of like reimagining how you behave in your relationship and putting yourself in that position of power all over again. But again, I go back to, I deal in a space where a lot of people are getting abused, either emotionally, verbally, financially, sexually, in just basic friendships and relationships. And I still kind of hold the belief that every single person in a marriage has either been the abuser or has been abused by their significant other. And I can say that in my own marriage, where I have been verbally abusive of my own husband, and it sucks. I wish that weren't the truth. But I think that we are the ugliest with the people who we're the closest with, and those nasty parts of us can come out, and we absolutely can live to regret it and hopefully do better. But when it becomes a pattern and a practice and the person won't work on it, it's time to GTFO.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's bold. That's really bold what you just said, that we're all either the abuser or the abused. I
believe that. I really believe that. I mean, even in our dynamics with our parents sometimes, and frankly, even with our children sometimes, like it's because when you look back one generation and you go back another generation and you look how relationships were, and then knowing that we're all carbon copies of the people who raised us, frankly, we can't kind of help it in some senses, and we're trying to evolve and trying to move forward from that. But I think the sooner we accept that it is a natural part of life, an ugly part of life, and not to be condoned, but something to be worked on in every single relationship, the more emphasis you'll get on. We have a rule now where we don't talk about the D word and we don't say the F word. So if we're in a heated argument, because, I have a potty mouth normally in life, boy, you get me fired up into a conversation with my husband, and I'm going to be very, very disrespectful because I'm adding profanity to it. So we have to not use profanity when we're talking to each other, and that's a ground rule. And we can never say we're going to get a divorce or it's time for us to talk about this when we're upset. Like it's off the table. You cannot say it. And that helped us a lot too, because boy, anytime you get into these difficult conversations and you start acting this combative way, you're not going to get to the other side and things are going to be better.
Did anybody ever say divorce if they didn't mean it? I'm not
for me.
Yeah, like, have you ever brought up anybody that wants to share? Has anybody ever brought up the D word? Because I'm thinking, if someone says the D word, is it because that's really what they want?
I think in that moment, probably.
Absolutely. So. I still get mad and in my mind think like, what would it be like if I weren't married to this person anymore? And this is a guy I love so much as my absolute best friend. He's my business partner. You know what I mean? Like, but you get upset. And if you have a strong fight or flight, those are things that come to your mind because of your hard wiring, not because it's actually something that you want long term. Like your amygdala has been hijacked. And so you go into this fight or flight. It is your survival instinct that absolutely kicks in and thinks those things. But that's why you can't be throwing those words around when your brain is hijacked.
Yeah, they have consequences.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to say, there's a couple of things before we got married. There's a couple of pieces of advice that people gave us, and some advice that I now give to people and I gave to myself. Number one, I never, because of what I do for a living, I always tell people, do not commingle your money, especially if you are a very controlling when it comes to money like I am. We have completely separate accounts. We don't ever argue about money. We don't fight about money, although sometimes I disagree with the way he spends money, but that's okay. It's not my money, right? And one of the things that someone told us, and I really think about this all the time when we get into fights, and we fight like everybody else. But one of the things that someone said to me was, happy wife, happy life. They actually said it to him, right? But in that, like, I took it to, okay, as long as he's happy, right? There's even a quote by someone, the happiness in a happy marriage, you have to think about the other person's happiness before you think about your own, which is really hard. I'm an only child. That's really hard, right? But now I often before I do something or make decisions that's going to affect both of us, I think about that. I'm like, oh, I really want this, but by doing this, will this make him really unhappy? And I recently just made a decision that made both of us miserable. And I was like, and he told me not to do it. And of course I did it because I was like, oh, you're not supporting me. But he was right? So there's I think this is, when it comes to marriage, you have to realize, you're not just you. There's two of you. You have to think about the two of you. You have to think about the family. There's so many other things. And I'm happily married. We have our disagreements like everyone else. We've had our tough times like everybody else. We have a mom that lives with us. There's a lot of challenges in addition to the normal, family situation. But I think that's really the biggest advice. And on the flip side, right, we're going back to this conversation. Hey, when do you know when it's time to leave? It's when that other person is never really thinking about you, right? Like if that person is never thinking about you, if you're like, hey, and they're like, yeah, I don't have time. Yeah. If that's like the way your conversations are going, it's time to leave, right? Like, why would you?
Yeah. When you feel like there's never discussion or appreciation for what you need, right? Like if it's always about the other person or the other person is always dismissing, like if I were to say, hey, we have a problem here. And if my guy was like, no, it's your problem. You have a problem. No, it's a we problem because we're a we. So, it's a we. So if you're not talking about that, and I think we see that a lot in divorce when people come to us, when they finally have decided, that's what we hear a lot, is that the other person just did not feel like they were being seen or heard or recognized, what they wanted or needed in the marriage. And obviously that goes on for a long time. It's not like, one thing happens and you're at the lawyer's office. It's something that's been happening for a very long time, sometimes years, sometimes decades.
Yeah. And I think that's the key is like, people go through stuff. There are, in a long-term marriage, you're going to have periods of time where one person isn't giving as much as the other person because that person's going through some shit, right? And so I think you have to be like, okay, is this like a short-term like slump? We're going through something, or is this a consistent pattern that is not going to change?
Yeah, so that I think that goes more to the question we posed today is how do you know when it's time for divorce? And I think that answers that is, when if it's something that just happened, don't run off to the lawyer's office. Because I think, at least I hear the older generations complain, people today, they don't, I do doesn't mean what it used to mean, is better for worse, and sickness and health and all of that. And maybe people are just too quick to say, you know what, this isn't working, let's throw in the towel. What do you guys think of that?
If I didn't have kids, I would probably be divorced by now. Not because I think that would have, in retrospect, been the right decision, but because it would have been such an easier decision. The idea of not having my kids with me at the holidays and having to split holidays was enough for me to leave every drop of blood, sweat, and tears on the marriage counseling mat. And it was there that a lot got resolved. And I had so much resentment and things that were so inside of me that I was thinking it was my husband's fault, but it was all this lack of forgiveness that was inside of me. But in any event, yeah, I don't know that it's that people give up too easily these days. I think that now we just have the option to be able to give up these days, where before we didn't have that option. Women would have left a lot sooner if they'd been able to have a credit card or get a business loan or not have some other male co-signer on things. I think we would have seen that. There are too many variables to be able to compare now versus then, because there are too many, I don't know the math words for it, but there are just too many additional variables that make them apples and oranges. But I don't know that people are more flighty today than they used to be, but we definitely have more resources available to us now, including counseling, coaching, acceptance of mental health issues, where I think that actually gives marriages longevity.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we're talking about the value of people trying to stick it out and work through things, because marriage isn't just supposed to be easy all the time. It's not supposed to just be this wonderful thing all the time, right? We're all human beings. We all have bad days. Our lives go through seasons, I can look back on my life and see times that were easier, and it was easier to be happy. And then other times where I had some real challenges, and I probably wasn't the most pleasant person to be around. And so when you're married, you're experiencing that directly with each other all the time, and it kind of ebbs and flows. I always sort of joke that my long-term boyfriend and I, that we're not sort of in the on the downside at the same time. So I think some of that stuff matters too. But that said, sometimes there does come a time where you've tried to stick it out. You've tried to work things out. Where's that moment? And maybe I'm just trying to identify something that doesn't exist, but where's that moment where it's time to start saying, I don't think that we can work this out? Or, is it valid to say, I've really tried. I'm not in love with this person anymore. Should I stay because we have children together? Do you guys have any feelings about that?
There's a book that I recommend a lot called Too Good to Leave, Too Bad to Stay. And it's by Dr. Amira Kirschenbaum. And it's really good, in my opinion, as far as walking you through kind of diagnosing the problems in your relationship. And I just really think it comes down to when you get to the point that you realize this isn't going to change, then you owe it to yourself to not stay miserable.
Right. And if you're miserable, right? If you're just, I think it's happy to glad, or this isn't ideal right now. I think miserable is such an important state to be in for an extended period of time, and you've tried to fight your way out of it, or love your way out of it, I guess is the more appropriate way of putting it. But just being dissatisfied, or a 3-star Google review for an extended period of time, that means there's still something, a lot of things that are working. I'm reading a book right now. I love that we're all readers. You can't help it, I guess. But I'm reading a book right now called the gap versus the gain. And it really encourages you, the moral of the story of the book is to really focus on the things that you have overcome rather than focusing on the things that, you set a goal and you got to 80%. And so you're going to focus on the 20% that you didn't get rather than looking at the 80% that you did get. And I think that that's a way of life. It's written for business, but it really is a way of life. And I love Dolly Parton, and I was watching a bunch of Dolly Parton, like reels last night, and she was quite racy, like she would say whatever came to her mind, but she was just so folksy with the way that she would say it. She talks about like how she's just never viewed herself as a loser because she was dirt poor. She had nothing to lose and everything to gain. And when you kind of look at your relationships that way too, what is it that you would lose and what would you gain if you stayed or if you left? And I think those are really good things to look at. And then you can also have an appreciation for, if you do decide to go, you can still have an appreciation for, look at all that we went through. Like it didn't work out for the long haul. Like we're not getting buried together, but look at everything that we went through to get to this point. And maybe that will then make the divorce process less nasty. Because I assume that, Christina, you help people reframe the way that people experience divorce. It doesn't have to be this like scorched earth, never speak to them again, like spit on the ground they walk on kind of experience. They can have a different experience of it. And I think that would also be something that when it's time for a divorce and you don't wait so long that you like want to murder the person.
Yeah, that there's real value to that. That's a reason to leave if you're feeling like you've been feeling like it's time to go,
or it's time for them to go.
Oh yeah, somebody got to go.
But seriously, yeah.
Do it before you hate each other.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the worst thing for kids to grow up in is, and I don't know if you guys, dealt with any of this, but like the worst thing for children to grow up in is knowing that their parents hate each other. Like, and I have friends, we know people who said that, yeah, my parents got divorced after I went to college and they should have gotten divorced 10 years earlier, right? Mm-hmm. They both would have been happier. The kids would have been in a happier home. So yes. And I have to say, like me and my husband, when we were by ourselves, so happy all the time, right? Like no stress. Then we had a baby, didn't sleep for like 18 months. So kids add an additional stressor to your relationship. And I always tell people, like kids are great. We have 2 of them, love them to death. However, you have to be mentally prepared, not just as yourself. You have to be mentally prepared as a marriage partner, right? Mm-hmm. So when your partner is up all night, right? Like the next day, it should be you taking over. So there's a lot of things to figure out. So yes, kids sometimes are the reason to stay, but sometimes they're not, right? Like if they can feel that you are unhappy, they could hear the whatever it is, screaming, yelling, whatever is going on in the household. Sometimes it's better for their mental health for you guys to separate amicably, right, if possible, and move on so they can be in a home where people aren't yelling and screaming all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's a big question, is to ask yourself, like, what is my child learning by growing up and observing my marriage? And that was kind of a big thing for me, is like deciding, is it better for me to stay for my kid, or is it better for my kid for me to leave? And then, a big question and answer was, I wouldn't want him to repeat what I'm doing, and what I am, demonstrating to him is a marriage is not healthy.
Yeah, I always tell my clients that when they're struggling with that decision is what are you modeling for your kids now? Because I've seen it go both ways. I've seen the kids that grow up to have a marriage that looks just like it, but then I've also seen the kids that grow up to say, I saw my parents' marriage. It was horrible. I'm never doing that. I don't ever want to get married. So, you want to remember that you're modeling for them. Like, just like you model how to use a fork and, how to do different things. You're modeling for them too, to how to have a relationship and how to respect themselves.
My marriage counselor always talks about, I don't know what study it was, but basically that the drop-off rate of divorce for people who have kids is it drops off significantly when the kid turns 5 or basically goes to kindergarten. And so it's like when we entered counseling, I had 4 kids in 4 years, and my youngest was like 2.5 or 3. And she was like, look, you're in the absolute hardest stage. Statistically speaking, you're in the absolute hardest stage. That also gave me in the back of my mind some Michelle Obama inspiration of like, maybe it's just a season. Yeah. Maybe it's not us. Maybe it's just, this is a hard season. You know, like any good TV show, they have usually a bad season. You got to stick with it.
Yeah, definitely. You know, my grandparents were married for 60 years. And my grandmother passed. My grandmother passed too about 15 years later. But my grandmother always said we idolized them, you know, because I don't remember them like a lot from when they were young, because because I wasn't born. But even when I was, you know, growing up with them and watching them, you know, you don't always understand the dynamic that's happening between people as a kid. And so by the time I was more of an adult, their relationship was really wonderful. And they were sort of, you know, we idolized them. And my grandmother would say, you know, we had hard times. Like everything wasn't always peachy for 60 years. You know, we had our own challenges and we got past them. But the people that I saw, you know, closer to the end of their marriage were like just lovely and perfect. And, you know, you always saw the love between them. And you didn't see any of that hard stuff. So I do wonder sometimes how many of these people that are getting divorced, how many of them, if they were able to get past those things, would they be like my grandparents, you know, in their old age, past all that stuff and grateful that they got past it.
That's why I could do a 3 out of 5 marriage, but I couldn't do a 1, maybe not even a 2 out of 5 for long. Because a 3 out of 5, you can work to improve that. If that's as bad as it's getting, is just like, this is just mediocre. I wanted something more. I wanted there to be spice in my life. I wanted it to be where I felt cherished and loved and all these other things. That's happy. That's glad to happy or happy to glad. I don't know which direction that is. But it really, for me, goes back to as soon as someone is coercing you, threatening you, saying they're going to get the kids, or that you're not a good parent. Maybe you're not a good parent. You have to have some introspection there. But any of those types of things, that for me is just like the line in the sand. And I also think, I was thinking through this as we were talking, if I will give my employees a performance improvement plan that gives them a minimum of 30 days to improve, that outlines specifically quantifiable things that they need to do in order to stay, but I won't be able to do the same thing for my spouse, I think that's unfair because you're not communicating what your needs really are. Now, I'm not saying that you should give them the PIP and like have them initial next to it or anything, but I really think that thinking through something like that helps you identify what are the big pain points for me, what are the actual problems, and what could this person quantifiably do that would help me feel differently and help me feel more valued in the relationship or whatever.
That's exactly what my individual therapist had me do. So I went to individual therapy, like, I'm not happy in my marriage. I'm having a hard time deciding. And that's exactly what she had me do, is like, she had me define, what is it that you need that you're not getting? Okay, talk to him about that. Let's put a timeline on this. And then, you know, if it doesn't happen in X amount of time, let's talk and regroup about what do you do next. And that for us led us to divorce.
Yeah. And this is where, like, I'm not going to get my bra out and burn it right here, but this is where I think the patriarchy hurts everybody. Because when we have men who are expected to model a certain and act a certain way, and women, strong women who have very specific, you know, parameters, and we bring that, and no one has ever really allowed men to not just get so defensive and really be open to that. That is a lot of social conditioning that is damaging, not only for us, but is also damaging for them, because nobody likes feeling defensive. Nobody likes feeling under attack the moment something is brought up. But I really source that back to the patriarchy sucks for all of us.
It does. Yeah. So I saw something, I see, you know, I was doom scrolling, I guess you could say. And I came across something, I think what Jeanette, what you had said earlier, or somebody said it about how women are happy when they're
single than married. Yeah.
So I came across something on Instagram, and you never know any of these things are true, so you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. But somebody was saying how women, when they get to be like perimenopausal age, that something hormonal is happening and they just don't give a shit anymore, like before, where they called it like the hormonal veil, where your hormones were fluctuating more, and you kind of had like a more of a filter at times, so you could sort of keep the peace a little bit, like you just kind of knew how to maneuver and how to do that, right? Which I think women do. But then as you get more towards like perimenopause or menopausal age, something hormonal happens and you just don't give a shit anymore. You're like, I don't care. This is what I think. This is what I want. I'm just going to say it. I'm not sugarcoating anymore. I don't know. Like, I mean, I just turned 50, so I guess I'm sort of in that group. But I kind of feel like I always was that way.
Yeah, I think you have always been that way. What I know of you, yeah, I don't know. I don't know you super well, but I think that's always been like one of your gifts. But I wonder if Chelsea Handler is like the spokesperson for happily married, happily no kids, because she does seem like she's really happy.
And she does not apologize for it either. She'll even make fun of the people that have kids, like, ha ha, I'm enjoying myself because I don't have kids.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Man.
All right. So there's a lot to unpack, and I think we just scratched the surface, but we're not going to solve all the world's problems just in this episode today. Maybe the next episode. So why don't we leave everybody with just, let's leave it on a good note, like something positive instead of doom and gloom. What do you think is the best piece of advice that you could give anybody if they're having marital issues right now and they still want to try to save their marriage?
I think that you're in the driver's seat of your life. You're the actor, the writer, the to some extent, like the cinematographer of your whole life story. And if you really think about it that way, and you're like, what would be my like next scene in this movie? And if the next scene in the movie is like everything gets resolved and we start moving forward, then start really putting some energy into making that dream come true. And if instead the next scene is like, and then I left and I got my own apartment in New York City and whatever it is that, needs to happen for you, like that's very likely what needs to happen. Our subconscious knows so much about what we really need, and all these other things around us can sometimes be confusing, but you're in the driver's seat. Just enjoy that.
Great advice. How about you, Jeanette?
I think it's just be willing to do the hard work and really look at yourself and go to therapy. Don't resist going to therapy. I have referred a lot of people to therapists who have consulted with me and they've ended up fixing things. I do believe that if both people really want to make it work and both people are, willing to go to therapy, that there's a really good chance of saving your marriage.
Good advice.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the biggest thing really in any marriage is communications, right? Like, I think you have to tell the other person what you want, and the other person has to be open to listening. Vice versa, you have to listen when they say, I'm unhappy with whatever it is that's happening, right? And you have to be able to work together and go through whatever needs, whether it's divorce, whether it's staying together, whichever path you end up taking, it's fine. Either way, it will all work out for the best. I really believe, I'm one of those optimists. I believe everything works out for the best. It happens exactly like it's supposed to. And life will go on either way, as married or as divorced. So.
Excellent advice. I actually, that was exactly what I was going to say is speak unequivocally about what you want. Because I hear a lot of people say things like, well, I mean, he should know, right? Isn't it obvious? Or, when you ask them, well, tell me exactly what you said, they're hinting, they're beating around the bush. It's like, say it unequivocally. Use the right words, like don't hint. People cannot be a mind reader. So, but the other side of that is, asking for what you want, communicating what you want. But at the same time, you have to listen to the other party, because sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, if someone's complained a million times that it really upsets them when you throw your towel on the floor, it might seem like a stupid thing, but it's kind of like, it's like the blob, it'll just get bigger and bigger. And when you combine that with other things, other towels, other proverbial towels, people can feel like they're not being listened to, so also pay attention to what your partner is telling you. It might seem silly to you. It might seem stupid. Like if it really bothers them that much that you're leaving the towel on the floor, pick up the towel. It's like, really listen to what someone's telling you. All right. So thank you. This was great. I enjoyed this conversation. Yeah.
Good stuff.
So, it really is. It's good stuff. And I'm going to put the links to those books you guys talked about in the comments. So if anybody wants to check those out, they can. And I'm going to put links to all of your websites in the comments.
So I plug my new podcast. It's called A Holistic Dose. And it's really about like women and midlife transformations. And we're going to be talking about perimenopause and all kinds of fun stuff.
Well, I will have to listen to that. And I guess this must be your co-host, Tiffany.
Yeah, Tiffany. Yeah.
Tiffany Nicole Castillo said that you're going to do an episode on women in their 40s, a holistic growth podcast. Yeah. So they're going to cover not caring as much in your 40s. So I think that sounds like an excellent topic. I can't wait to hear that. All right. But anyway, you've been listening or watching Lawyer Radio, the official podcast of Wolf Esquires, every Friday right here on Facebook and YouTube live at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I hope to have you ladies on again to talk about something else and hear all your wisdom. But thanks for watching or listening, and everybody have a great weekend.
Bye. Thanks so much for having me.
Bye.